The next wave of business leaders won't just use AI, they'll master momentum with it, starting now. Welcome to the Mastering AI Momentum Show, where visionary founders and driven business leaders turn artificial intelligence, automation, and scalable systems into real growth, real scale, and real freedom. If you're ready to break bottlenecks, reclaim your title, and scale smarter, this is your playbook. Let's dive in. Here are your hosts, Allie Porter and Elise Smith.
Welcome to the Mastering AI Momentum Show, where today's top entrepreneurs share how they're scaling smarter, evolving faster, and navigating the future of business. My name is Elise Smith, your business AI strategist, and I'm here with our incredible guest today, Joel Trammell. And Joel is a serial entrepreneur, a veteran of the CEO role for 30 plus years, and a leading CEO educator. He has twice founded and led startups to 9-figure exits and served as CEO of the network services provider Black Box Corporation. Joel regularly shares his expertise on the chief executive role, speaking at events nationwide and contributing to publications including Entrepreneur, Forbes, and Inc.com. Like he's a powerhouse, guys. He is the author of 3 books: The CEO Tightrope, the Chief Executive Operating System, and the Manager's Playbook, and is Chairman Emeritus on the Austin Technology Council. Most recently, he founded CEO-S, a system that supports CEOs in creating predictable business performance. Joel currently lives in Austin, Texas, with his wife and 3 children, and in his free time, you might find him on the tennis court. You can find his latest thoughts and advice on the CEO role at managingthefuture.co. So welcome, Joel. So happy to have you.
Great to be here, Elise.
Awesome. Good. So I'd love to hear from yourself as far as like who you serve and how you serve them.
Sure. So I've been fascinated for over 30 years on the role of the CEO, specifically how do you run an organization when it scales? And when it gets big enough where you don't really know everybody, you can't direct everybody. And how do you make an organization like that work well? And so that's been my journey for the past 30 years.
I love that. And if anyone's listening and they're like, man, I need to work with Joel, what are some things that they might be saying to themselves right now of this is why I need to work with your company?
Yeah, so most people get into the CEO role through being an expert in some functional area of the business. They're a great salesperson, they're a great marketing person, they're a great finance person, whatever. They rise up through the ranks. One day somebody knocks on the door and says, we think you'd be a great CEO. And what they often don't realize is that job is totally different than any of the other jobs they've had in the organization before. It's not just a higher level job. It's not just the grand VP of sales or the grand VP of finance. It is a totally different type of job, and the nature of the job is different. The skills that you need are different. And so most people enter the CEO role and they may be very smart, very talented business people, but they're very unprepared for that new job because it's like they've changed sports and gone from playing baseball all their life to suddenly playing basketball and wondering why they're not any good at it.
Mm-hmm. So true. I know, because I came from the corporate world and even just like moving from like salesperson to manager, they always just bring up that really awesome salesperson, but those skills don't always translate. And especially in the CEO role, it's a completely different job. Can you expound a little bit more on that?
Well, just simple things like when you're the VP of sales in an organization, when a problem comes to your desk, well, first of all, it's a sales problem. Or it wouldn't be coming to your desk. It would be going to somebody else's desk. And you're likely the person who has the most experience and knowledge in sales. And so you're an expert in that area. So how does an expert make a decision? Well, they ask for people to give them all the data. And then they use this great pattern matching capability in our human brains that maybe haven't seen the exact same situation, but they've seen something enough similar that they make a decision and go on about their business. The problem is if I take that sales executive and then put them in the CEO role, the first knock on their door might be about a lease in Poughkeepsie, and they're not an expert on leasing. And if they take the same approach, they say, send me the lease, let me read the lease, let me study leasing. Well, that where's that time going to come from? Because 30 minutes later, another knock on the door is going to be about our HR policy in California. And it's going to be something they've never had any experience with. And so the key to the CEO role is not being the expert anymore. It's being expert in figuring out who are the experts that you need to trust and building a team of those people that work in a cohesive fashion.
Yeah, it's like Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He's one of my favorite authors. He's always talking about who, not how, right? It's not how you solve the problem. It's who you get to work with to solve the problem, especially because I think at the CEO level, when we move up from that other position, we're used to solving the problems, right? Because it lands on our desk and therefore we need to make sure that we solve it. But that CEO hat is a completely different problem solving. And I love how you pointed that out. So have you always been passionate about business, or how did you get started with this?
Yeah, so my dad was a university professor, and he had fought in World War II and then got out and used the GI Bill to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and then he was 6 months away from his PhD when his master professor died. He didn't want to start over. He had 3 kids by that point, and so he took a job at a university teaching and became a tenured professor, but never finished his PhD. And so he had this thing about he wanted his kids to get a PhD, and I was the last of 5 kids, and I was the last hope to get the PhD, and I had done well in school, and so I thought that's what I was supposed to do, kind of. And so I took a job coming out of college with the U.S. Navy, teaching at what they call Naval Nuclear Power School. And I wanted to see if I liked teaching. And then the Navy, of course, would pay for you to get your master's. And so I was going to get my master's and then go get a PhD somewhere and fulfill the dream, the family dream. Well, I love the teaching part, but I took a couple of graduate math courses to pursue a master's in engineering and realized I just had no interest in engineering anymore. It was just very theoretical to me. It wasn't practical. And I had met a couple of people in high school that we would now call entrepreneurs. We didn't really use that word in those days, but small business people. One who kind of would buy a business, try to fix it up, and then sell it for a profit. And I built a little bit of a relationship with those people. And so business had kind of fascinated me. And so I wanted to get I was going to pivot and get an MBA. But at that time, the University of Central Florida, where I was stationed, wanted you to take 60 hours of undergraduate business before they would allow you into their MBA program. And as an arrogant engineer, I wasn't going to do that. And so I just started a business and figured I would learn that way. And so that's how I ended up getting down the business road. And then, of course, when you start your own business and it goes okay, at least you keep it going for a while, you become somewhat unqualified to do anything else. And you certainly don't want to go work for somebody. So you better figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, I love that. That is such a fun story. So I didn't quite catch that. Did you finish your PhD then? Did you get it?
No, I did not. I did not even finish never did the master's. I never did the PhD. A couple of graduate math courses, and I just had no interest in pursuing.
I'm sure that your dad was okay with that. I love that. So it doesn't sound like this is your first business, obviously, because you've had many others. So what was the first business that you got started with?
Yeah, the first business, this will date me, but goes back to the PC days of where most of the personal computers were home built or put together with parts. White box, they called it. That was the majority of the market. And so initially I bought components for 5 PCs, put them together, sold them to friends, and then kind of quickly realized that there were a lot of people that wanted to do that as a business, but didn't understand how to start a business or anything. And so I had done a bunch of research on starting businesses. And this was a time when Prodigy, the computer network, that was a joint venture between IBM and Sears way back, before, pre-internet, obviously, was just getting started. And it had a way for you to create classified ads on the site. And so it was the first time you could actually take out a classified ad and have a range of people across the entire United States be able to see that ad. And so we started taking out ads about, hey, do you want to start your own computer business? Send away for this information packet. we would send them information with the idea that if they started the business, then they would buy through us and we would be a middleman for a larger distributor. And so that was the first business and how I got into the first business.
Wow. Oh man. I know it's crazy thinking about how much things have changed, right? Like I was just telling someone that I lived before the internet was mainstream. And it's just interesting. And especially with the AI world. I mean, they used to say that technology doubles every 18 months. And now I feel like we're almost month to month with everything that we can do. So I love the fact that you have that tech background. And I know you also kind of got into like helping businesses to grow and exit strategies and all of that. Is that right?
Yeah. So, you build a business, you sell it. I did that multiple times, and bought several businesses along the way as well. And so you develop some feel for that. It's really hard to read a book about that if you haven't lived through the exercise of selling a business, especially when it's a significant part of your net worth and all the ups and downs that go with that. That experience is hugely valuable. So I've through the years, spent a lot of time working with CEOs that wanted to exit their business or in the sale process or something. I tell them all the time it's going to be the hardest 6 months of your life. But if you're successful, it can be, of course, very emotionally and monetarily rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because you've had all of this experience with different businesses and, of course, the one that you have now, what are your key success tips on scaling your business to, million plus and beyond?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. People tend to think when they talk about scaling a business, they think very linearly that a $1 million business compared to a $2 million business, $2 million business is twice as complicated. And I've found it's much more quantized in the sense that the way I kind of have three categories from 1 to about 20 or 25 employees. I call that phase the project manager phase. The CEO really works as a project manager. And by that, I mean, they know everything that everybody is working on. They're making all the key decisions. Yes, they're the CEO, but they're also serving typically as all the other executive functions. And so they have the executive team meeting, when they get ready in the morning over coffee with themselves. And so that is kind of well understood how to run that. Doesn't mean it's easy. It's incredibly hard because you're constantly context switching. 1 minute you're doing the sales job, 1 minute you're doing the product job, 1 minute you're keeping the books, right? But it is all contained. And then as you transition from about 25 employees to 100, somewhere at 100 to 150 in there, you typically have the resources and need desperately to functionalize and put executives in charge of the 6 core functional areas of the business. So you hire a CFO, you hire a VP of sales, you hire a VP of marketing, you have a product person, you have a customer service person, and you have a HR person. Typically are the 6 kind of core functions that are necessary at that point. The challenge is getting from 25 to 150 without crashing. Because that's a very critical time. And we see in VC funding a lot of times when founders gets replaced, it's because they can't make that transition. They're trying to run the business at 75 the same way they ran it at 25, just work 3 times as hard. And that just becomes physically impossible to do. You can't know everything that's going on. So there's a big paradigm shift that has to happen in the way you think about the business and run the business. And getting through that transition from 25 to 150 is really the key to scaling. From there, things don't really change that much. I've run a 4,000 person public company, and that did not feel dramatically different to me than running a 200 person private company, because I was dealing with a full executive team in both cases, a board in both cases, a few individual contributors that were critical to the success of the organization. And yeah, as a public company, maybe I had to jump on a phone call and read a press release that the lawyers wrote once a quarter, but that didn't dramatically change the nature of the business and the nature of the CEO job. And so, once you've made that transition to 100 and 150, if you make that successfully, I think you can continue to run the business as long as you want to run the business, that you don't scale out. And we've seen this with great founders, right? the Zuckerbergs, the Gates, so on, Larry Ellison, these kind of people that made it through the transition. It wasn't like the business got too big for them. But there are a lot of times there's the failure between that 25 and 100 spot that really is where you need to think about how you change, how you run the business. And so that's where we spend a lot of time educating CEOs on.
Wow, that is such a good perspective that I don't feel like very many people are talking about. I mean, there's so many other things to talk about in business, but your people are key. I mean, if you don't have a good team, then the who not how becomes how not who, and then everything gets messed up, right?
Absolutely. I mean, people have told me I'm the most people-centric CEO they've met, and that always surprises me, because what other centric would you be running an organization with a group of hundreds of people? How can you not be people-centric? But I guess some people aren't.
Yeah, I've definitely been in corporations where they're not people centric, and you can feel a complete difference. So I love that. So when we're talking about that barrier of going from 1 to 25 and then 25 on up, I'm just curious. Have you thought about how AI can help with that transition?
Yeah, there's certainly cases where AI can make those numbers smaller. You need, in certain cases, fewer employees than you did in the old days. I used to feel like to build a enterprise software company, you had to have about 20 or 25 people just to have one of everything you needed to do. Uh, and that probably has changed a little bit. There are certain cases where you can do development work with far fewer people than we used to have. You can do customer support with far fewer people than we use. And so you're getting leverage from the AI technology. And so those numbers may shift around a little bit, but I've not yet seen AI really replace functionality in any significant way in an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that perspective. So when it comes to scaling your current business right now, what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome in order to be able to hit that hurdle?
Yes. So, I mean, the big thing is, when can you find the right people? I mean, it's great to say as we go from 25 to 100, we're going to add all these wonderful executives. And next month we're going to hire the CFO. And then in 6 months, we're going to hire my sales guy. But as a small business, you don't get that choice. And if you do, if you follow some rigid thing, you're probably going to hire the wrong people. And,
Okay.
and so people, you need to be thinking about these positions months, if not years, in advance of when you actually need them, keeping your eye open, building relationships. Who is that salesperson that I need to bring into scale? Who's that CFO that can help take us to the next level? Because as a small business, the great people aren't probably beating a path to your door. And so that's a very proactive thing that the CEO has to be involved in, is kind of chief recruiting, especially at the executive level, if you're going
Mhm.
to build a team that's going to be high performing and continue to grow the business.
Since you've had so much experience with this, what percentage do you hire within house of just being able to give somebody a level up, or what percentage do you hire externally when it comes to the C-suite positions?
Yeah, it depends, but often the people that are most successful in the early days of the business do not scale to the C-suite positions when the business is 100 people or whatever. They're just not I mean, it's experience. With a 10,000 hour rule of doing something. And so very few scale up to those executive level positions. And a lot of companies make the mistake of giving people in the early days big titles that,
Mm.
maybe works when there's 10 or 20 people, but is a role that they're not going to be able to fill when there's 100 people. And so then that's always a difficult conversation. You can never downgrade somebody's title. So I'm always telling, early stage CEOs, be very careful who you give those VP titles to, and make sure that if you're going to call them the VP or the chief revenue officer or whatever, that they're capable of scaling to the next couple of growth marks that you're going to hit as an organization. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift gears and talk a little bit more about AI. What are your thoughts on AI in general? Everybody has some, right?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, 2, 3 years ago, whenever the wave really hit with the first Chat GPT LLM, I sat down and wrote a letter to my family, my business associates, everybody kind of in my internal circle, and said, "Hey, I've seen this movie before." I go back, as you can probably tell, my first programming class I took on punch cards, which, most people listening to this probably don't know what a punch card is. But anyway, and so I saw the IBM PC was the first one where you went, oh, this is a change. This fundamentally changes the way people do business. And spreadsheets, going back to Lotus 1, 2, 3 was a big change. And then, of course, internet and cell phones. And there've been 4 or 5 of these really things that were consequential. And so I realized when I saw the first, working LLMs, that this was consequential. So I wrote a letter to everybody. I said, this is one of those changes that I've seen 4 or 5 times now in my career. Now, of course, AI is not new. I took an AI programming class back when I was in college in the dark ages. So, and we were then told it was always 5 years away. It's 5 years away, 5 years away. And of course,
Interesting.
yeah, finally it did hit, and it is absolutely significant. Now, I tell people how to think about it, especially if you're not a technologist and don't want to dig into how it's really working or anything. I think about it as the, smartest high school kid that you've ever known that was raised on Mars. In
Hmm.
that, they're really smart in a sense of knowing a lot of things and being able to come up with a lot of things, but they often lack total context for the real world and the real problem you're particularly trying to solve. And so, where they excel is doing things that smart people do well, which is, large sets of data, allows you to do things that you couldn't do before, couldn't do easily. Translations are one area that, used to be a long time and took a lot of effort. Now it's a push of a button. Summarizing and taking things like I'm working on a podcast where I want the user to be able to tell me how long they want the podcast to be, and the AI produces that length podcast. Because maybe I want 5 minutes today of news, maybe I want 30 minutes today of news. And so there are a lot of things that AI can do for you, but it is not to the point, again, where I've seen it really fully replace a human job per se. It may give you leverage. It may allow one person to do what 3 or 5 others could do before, but I
Agreed.
haven't seen it really replace a function.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that AI is only as good as the HI, right? Like
Yes.
the human intelligence still has to be there. And I'm hoping that as a society we don't get to the point where we take the human aspect out of everything, because if that is the case, then there's no human connection. Like we are humans, we need human connection. And that actually makes it more of a premium for people who are adding it. So I know for us, when we build out full AI agents for businesses, we always add in a member of our staff, our AI growth partner, to partner with the other human on the other side of the agent. You know what I mean? So I think that what you're pulling out is really interesting in how you've seen things evolve over the years, and immediately you knew this was going to be a game changer.
Yeah, and I think you have to understand it's available to everybody. So, a lot of people think, let's imagine we were, living in primitive times and somebody created a power saw. You might say, oh, I've got this tremendous opportunity. I can cut down trees, I can build things, but everybody gets the power saw.
Mm-hmm.
So
True.
it doesn't provide you any competitive advantage, uh, really, because everybody's got the same tool. And so it does go back to the human capabilities, and human interaction is going to be more and more important. Most people don't want to talk to a computer, don't want to deal with a computer. Most people want human interaction, at least some of the time, and that will make those human interactions more valuable rather than less valuable, because the AI is going to be obviously relatively inexpensive and universally available.
Yeah. And it is so interesting because we all have access to the same tool. That's where your talents and your gifts and your, challenges and trials and everything that makes you who you are and that expertise that you bring to the table, that's what sets you apart. Right? Is that it's the way that you think, it's your methodology. And so it's not like AI is going to ever create AI on its own and that's going to be good enough, because we need to have that human connection. We need to have that human element that makes it different. Otherwise, everybody has the same tool like you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody has access to a piano and a guitar these days in most of the world. But that doesn't mean I can write great songs.
Exactly. Or that all those songs are the same. So yeah, completely agree. Well, let's just have some fun for a second. Whether this is in life or in business, if you could have anything done with AI, what would you have done?
I would have a news reporter that reported factually and unbiased
Good
on
luck
what
right
on what happened.
there. Yeah, exactly. I love that. Why do you feel like that's important to you?
Well, because so many people believe a bunch of things that aren't true, and that leads to them taking a whole bunch of positions that are not helpful to advancing the world. I mean, I talk about running a business as kind of the search for objective reality. In a business, you can't ignore the facts of the world. If you buy 1,000 white trucks thinking you can sell them and nobody buys them, you can't really ignore people didn't really want the white trucks, But in a lot of our policy and social policy and stuff, we ignore those things. We think people ought to want white trucks, so we buy 1,000 white trucks and then they don't buy them. So we say we need to buy 1,000 more. We do things that just don't make any sense. Because we're able to avoid the facts a little bit and ignore reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's fun to talk about the different perspectives of AI, and we'll see where it goes from here, because man, the sky is the limit. So, neat. Well, thank you so much for being here on the show today, Joel. If people want to know more about how they can work with you or how they can connect with you, where do they go for that?
Yeah, our website is ceosys.co, not .com, .co. And you're welcome to set up a meeting with me, talk about all the different ways we train CEOs and their executive teams on how to run their companies better.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, definitely connect with him, because as you can tell, he is like full of incredible knowledge and expertise that we all need as CEOs. So thank you again for pouring out your heart and your brain to us and all of your amazing tips and tricks and things to think about as we're building our businesses.
Great to be with you.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us. This has been an incredible episode of Mastering AI Momentum, where AI means not just artificial intelligence, but also abundance and impact. Because scaling isn't about doing more, it's about building smarter and staying true to really what matters most for you and your company. So we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Mastering AI Momentum. If today's episode gave you clarity or sparked a breakthrough, share it, review it, leave us a comment, and show Ali and Elise how you're turning AI into ROI. And make sure you subscribe, because the next episode could be the strategy that unlocks your next level. Until then, build smart, scale fast, and let AI multiply your momentum.